Right, welcome everybody. Today's webinar is looking at the Managing Professional Transition module. And this is the module where people can take this 5-day course or a self-paced online course to transition themselves from an ITIL expert to a ITIL 4 managing professional. So I'm Steve Lawless, and we'll bash on with the presentation. Okay, so rules for the presentation are all mics on mute, which I believe everybody is. If you get disconnected for some reason, please just sign back in. The webinar will be recorded, so you can pick it up on the recording if you can't reconnect. If you have any questions, feel free to raise a chat, and Debbie or Bob Amies will answer that chat. Or if at the end, if there's any questions which they've been unable to answer, and I doubt it, then I'll take a look at those questions. Okay, so Purple Griffin, we're an accredited training organisation with People Cert and Axelos, and I've been operating for over 18 years, UK based, and we offer over 300 courses, I think it is now. Myself, Steve Lawless, I'm a trainer consultant with Purple Griffin for the last 18 years, one of the founders of the company. Worked in IT for over 40 years and worked with and in ITIL environments the last 30 years. So I've been certified at ITIL version 1, version 2, 3, and now ITIL 4. As well as ITIL, I train and consult in VeriSM, DevOps, ITAM, SIAM, and more recently, artificial intelligence. The purpose of the webinar really was to give people an introduction to what the course is, and the purpose of the course, what the course covers, what is new in this MPT course, and what's the same as the ITIL version 3 courses that we've run in the past, or the Manager's Bridge if anyone transitioned from version 2 to version 3 back in about 2008 to 2010. And opportunity for you to ask some question and answers. So the transition module is here. It's the link really between those who are either ITIL experts in their own right, they have the accreditation of expert, either transitioning from version 2 to version 3, across that bridge, or moving through the life cycle or the capability modules and passing the MALC exam, which would then accredit them at ITIL V3 expert. So the Managing Professional course really is to take everybody to the Managing Professional accreditation. So rather than have to go through the ITIL Foundation and the 4 individual intermediate level courses, there is this one step to move them to Managing Professional. And several thousand people have been through this step. It was designed really as one of the first courses in ITIL 4 to primarily move trainers and consultants through to the level where they could teach ITIL 4, but also for people who'd invested a lot of time and energy getting to ITIL version 3 expert, to give them the opportunity to move quickly over to ITIL Managing Professional. The Managing Professional Transition module itself covers 5 courses. So it covers an element of ITIL Foundation, an element of CDS, DSV, High Velocity IT, and DPI, Direct Plan and Improve. So it covers about a third of those 3-day courses. So basically, day 1, you would cover Foundation, day 2, Create, Deliver and Support, day 3, drive stakeholder value. day 4, high velocity IT, and day 5, direct plan and improve. So it's between 30 and 40% of those courses. The areas the MPT module focuses on are those areas which are new. So it doesn't focus on process and practice to any great extent. The only practice that's really covered in any depth is OCM, Organizational Change Management. A lot of the other practice areas are talked about to a certain extent, and in CDS, some of them, well, 12 to be exact, are looked at because they support the 2 value streams which are discussed in the Create, Deliver and Support course. The aim of the MPT course was really to give people this quick move. So instead of having to invest 15 days of training and obviously costs, you could just invest in 5 days classroom or virtual learning, or you could do the course via self-paced online training. There is no equivalent ITIL bridge at the foundation level. That was there between version 2, version 3, but it's not there between ITIL v3 and ITIL 4. The exam for MPT is similar to the intermediate level exams in terms of being closed book, 90-minute, 40 questions, simple multiple choice, and obviously 25% extra time if you qualify. The exam is run and administered by PeopleCert, and just 2 tips really. Well, 3, I suppose, 3 tips. 1, make sure you have a photo ID before you take the exam, and 2, make sure that you're aware of the rules around taking the exam. So look at the email which PeopleCert sends through to you. And also, lastly, if you're using office equipment, so your business equipment, please check with the techies that it is capable of running the exam, because the exam will install an exam shield to prevent you moving away from the exam questions and potentially looking up the answers in an online book. So the questions, quite simple. There's no case study. Very simple, standard for, is it A, B, C or D? No complexity, no graded questions. The majority of questions are based at Bloom's level 2. And this is where you can actually explain and understand a concept. And the remaining of the questions are level 3. And that's where you can apply a concept or an idea to a very small scenario. Okay. Beyond that, there's no questions at higher levels. So level 4, 5, 6, and 7, no questions there. And I did question this with Axelos at the time, and their rationale was they wanted people who've invested time and energy in getting to a high level in version 3 to have an easy transition to ITIL 4, to the Managing Professional certification. So the Managing Professional, as I said, it's designed for people with ITIL v3 expert, but it also is there for people who are still working their way through the credit system on ITIL v3. So people who are still working through the life cycle or capability modules, this course really is there for them also. So if they get to 17 credits, rather than take MALC, they could take this bridging exam. It would mean they'd miss out on having the kudos of being an ITIL v3 expert, but I suppose a cheaper option and a quicker option, rather than taking 2 5-day courses. The MPT course doesn't cover areas like Create, Deliver and Support, direct, plan and improve in great level of detail, not to the same level of detail as would be covered in those individual courses. As I said, it just covers about 1/3 of those courses, and the focus really is on those areas which have changed or are new or are different to what's been taught in the past. We would recommend, though, that people get hold of the official books, because there's a lot of information in the official books which isn't covered at MPT, and it's not covered at the intermediate level courses of CDS, DPI, etc. So worthwhile investment. And also in terms of the practices, as I said, practices aren't really covered to any great extent on the MPT course, not even to the level that would be covered in the intermediate level courses. So very little content about practices other than organisational change management. But by passing ITIL Foundation, ITIL 4 version, or by passing the MPT course, you will gain 12 months free access to My ITIL, which is managed by Axelos. And after that, subsequent years, I think it's about £50 per annum to access the 34 practice guides, plus a lot of other information, white papers, case studies, things like that. So let's go back to the course. Day one, you'd cover ITIL Foundation. Again, not the full foundation, just the bits which are new to you. So what we're looking at is any key concepts. We're looking at guiding principles. We're looking at 4 dimensions. We're looking at the purpose of the value system itself and the value chain and the elements of the value chain and how they interconnect. So we've already done a recording of the ITIL Foundation course and what that would cover, but just fairly simply, let's go through it now. So what we've got to do for MPT is understand basic concepts. So you can recall the definition of what a service is, what utility and warranty are, what's the difference between the user and the customer, what service management is. And a new term in ITIL 4, we've got this sponsor. So a service sponsor would be someone who basically underwrites the service in terms of funding it. And customers, users and sponsors are consumers of our service. So it's about understanding those definitions. Most of them, utility, warranty, customer, user, we've used them from ITIL version 3 onwards. Other concepts we're looking at foundation level, which we need to understand, are things like cost and value, organisation, where an organisation could be a single person up to thousands of people, the difference between outcome and output, risk, and also how we could use utility and warranty to deliver value for services. Other areas we need to cover are things like concept of what a service offering is, which could be services, combination of services, products and services. It could be access to a SaaS solution, or it could be some support offering. So we'll look at foundation level, we'll look at what we mean by service offering. We'll also look at service relationship management, so the relationship between the service provider and the service consumer. We'll also look at how services are provisioned and services are consumed. Another area we'll look at, and this is covered in quite a bit depth on both the ITIL Foundation course and also the Managing Professional Transition, are the 7 guiding principles. And the guiding principles are interconnected. They're all considerations. So whenever we're doing anything, we should consider the 7 guiding principles, but they may not all be entirely practical or applicable all of the time to everything we do. some more applicable at more times, sometimes rather than others. The other area we're going to cover on day one for MPT is the 4 dimensions. And this, I say, sort of maps onto the 4 Ps of service design that we had in ITIL version 3. So it's organizations and people, information technology, suppliers and partners, value streams and processes. We've got the concept of the SVS, the service value system, which we'll cover on day one, looking at the various components, so the guiding principles, governance, so corporate enterprise IT governance, the value chain itself, the 34 practices, although we won't go into any detail around any of them other than saying they exist and this is how you access the data, and also continual improvement, which is also a practice, as well as it being part of the overall service value system. We look at the value chain, so look at the elements from engage, plan, improve, obtain and build, design and transition, deliver and support. Look at those elements individually, look at what they mean, what they contain, and how we map our various practices onto these elements within the value chain. Okay, so in terms of questions, this is the level of question, which is a Bloom's level 2. So it's looking at the, say, the 4 dimensions of service management, and the question says which dimension of service management considers governance, management, and communication. So is it A, B, C, or D? Hopefully you've made your mind up, and the answer would be A. Okay, so hopefully everybody got that correct. Okay, so questions are pitched at this level and slightly higher. So this is Bloom's level 2, Bloom's level 3, very short scenario, half a sentence, a very short sentence, and how would you apply this? And then is it A, B, C, or D? Okay, so that covers day one. Day one, concentrate on foundation. We may even be able to start create, deliver, and support late on in day one, but primarily it's day 2. And the area of the value chain we look at for CDS is this center portion. So it's the obtain and build, design and transition, deliver and support. So we don't go into as much detail as we would do within a 3-day CDS course. We focus on really the what's new, the new concepts, how CDS actually works. Okay, so the learning objectives from the MPT course are about understanding value streams across the value chain, and we'll look at 2 on day 2. So we'll look at the value stream for introducing a new service, and we'll also look at a user support value stream. We'll also look at some of the basic concepts and challenges across the value system, and we'd also look at how we manage resources in the service value system. So it's a cut down version of CDS effectively that we could run in one day. So the most of the day would be focused on the 2 value streams, 2 different value streams, and explaining the difference between them, how you would create them, why you would create them, what the challenges may be, and how we map practices onto these value stream steps. So that would be the end of day 2. Day 3, we start to look at drive stakeholder value, so the DSV course. Again, 1/3 of the DSV course. And the key elements that we cover here are around engagement and understanding what demand or opportunity is. So, and also how we deliver value. So it's roughly based on relationship management. So we're looking at the touch points we have with our customers and users and sponsors, and how we deliver value to them. And also not just focusing on customers and users, but also looking and considering at other stakeholders, and how they derive value and how value is co-created with our consumers as well. So the learning objectives for the DSV part of the MPT course are looking at the customer journey. So probably most of the day is based on the customer journey. So how we manage the various steps within the customer journey. So how we foster stakeholder relationships, how we shape demand, define our service offerings, how we onboard and offboard customers and users, how we can act together to co-create value in terms of the provisioning and consumption of services, and benefits realization. So how we actually prove with the delivered value to our consumers. So the customer journey really is all of the interactions and the touch points between service provider and service consumer. And it's not really, the focus isn't really on what we actually deliver. It's on how the service is delivered. So we could roughly map this onto utility and warranty. It's what the customer gets, and it's also how it's delivered to them. So we need to understand every touch point and every interaction, but we also need to put ourselves in the customer's shoes. So we need to be customer orientated to understand how the customer derives benefit from the various touch points along the customer journey, from a demand or opportunity to benefits realization. And as I said, it's not just about users and users and customers. It's about making sure we deliver value and co-create value for all of the stakeholders. It's not just focused on outputs and outcomes. It's also focused on the experience. So the customer's journey is a little bit more complex than just throwing something over the wall and running away. Okay, so here's the customer's journey, and on the MPT course, we look and go into a fair amount of detail at the various steps, how we explore opportunities, how we engage with our customers and consumers, how we offer, so what's our service offering, how we agree, so maybe agreeing how the service will be delivered, who will be delivered to, for what price, then onboarding the customer, and part of that onboarding might be offboarding them from a previous supplier or a previous provider, co-creation of value throughout the life cycle, and benefits realization. And the diagram at the bottom here between customer and service provider, what we have here is the various service interactions throughout the life cycle of this customer journey. We've got what we call the line of visibility, and this is the portion of the customer which the service provider can see, and this is the portion of the service provider which the customer can see. And we have this common band of visibility which sits between the customer and service provider, where we can map out the interactions. It's where everything's visible in terms of service provision, service relationships. So this is the area we operate within. Okay, so expanding that out a little bit more, we go into detail, as I said, for each of those steps, looking at it from a customer's perspective and also looking at a service provider's perspective. And you'll notice on some of them, it's the same. So where we're negotiating, we're doing the same, both sides doing the same. Whereas when we're looking at offering or producing an offering from the customer's perspective, it's about specifying requirements. But from a service provider's perspective, we're looking at shaping demand, designing the service offering, and selling the service to the customer. Okay, so that's the end of day 3. Day 4, we move on to high velocity IT. High velocity IT is doing everything we're doing in terms of great delivering and supporting services, but doing them in an agile way, a leaner way, using different concepts, more collaborative, more visible. So using a lot of those concepts that we'd employ in a DevOps environment or a bimodal environment. And in terms of what the HVIT portion of the course covers, really covers all elements of the value chain. The learning objectives of HVIT within MPT really is looking at the high velocity nature of digital enterprises. So looking at organizations which are providing services in an agile way, or maybe even in a bimodal way, where they've got legacy services they're providing maybe in a waterfall way, but they've also got DevOps teams who are managing the whole life cycle and the product backlog through various sprints. In terms of the digital product life cycle, it looks a little bit like the customer journey we've just looked at in Drive Stakeholder Value, but shortened in terms of exploring the various activities in terms of opportunity and demand, onboarding, co-creation, offboarding, and retirement of the service when the consumer no longer wishes to use that service. So it's looking at things in possibly shorter timescales in terms of delivery and support, and it's looking at more leaner, efficient, effective ways of managing these digital services. Okay, so in HVIT on day 4, we need to understand certain terms. So we need to understand what we mean by a digital organization. How is it different to any other organization? What we actually mean by high velocity IT. What's the difference between digital transformation and IT transformation? So they are slightly different. We're also looking at things like digital products, digital technology. So what do we mean by those terms? And also we're looking at how we can transform to a high velocity IT environment. Also looking at some of the challenges and looking at the aspects of whether it's desirable for some organizations. I know some organizations where it would not be feasible or desirable to implement high velocity IT. We also look at some of the IT objectives of high velocity IT. So we look at 5 objectives. So we look at it being a valuable investment. So in high velocity IT, we look at fast development. We look at resilient operations. So a case of if we release new code live, we find it's caused a failure or an outage, then how quickly can we restore normal operation? Can we back it out, replace it with a bug fix? And we look at various techniques around that. We look at value co-creation in a high velocity IT environment, and we look at concept of assured conformance to our policies, our guidelines, our governance. Okay, so Other principles, models and concepts we cover in high velocity IT are things like ethics, how we develop a safety culture and what safety culture actually means, what lean means, and how we can develop a lean culture, identifying waste and removal of unnecessary waste. We look at Toyota Kata. We look at lean, agile, resilient, continuous integration, continuous deployment. We look at things like concepts of service dominant logic, design thinking, complexity thinking. So we look at those and approaches and what benefit they would have. And then we also look at how we would use the various principles, models and concepts to help us deal with things like uncertainty, maybe in terms of customers not clearly understanding their requirements. We look at trust, so how we develop trust with our customers and consumers. We look at delivering higher level performance, how we can commit to that in the high velocity environment, how we can get services to market, so speed to market, in terms of helping customers achieve the outcomes they want to achieve, and also how we can improve, and how we improve through experimentation and other sorts of techniques. And it's, in summary, really, it's about how we pull all that together. So we do various exercises around looking at the behaviours, how we deal with uncertainty and things like that, against the objectives of high velocity IT, and how we can use the principles, models, like a safety culture and lean culture, how we can use those to set the right behaviours to achieve the objectives. So it's about really filling out this matrix in terms of the activities we can undertake, the principles and models and concepts we could adopt. Okay, so that takes us to the end of day 4. And moving on to day 5, we've got direct, plan and improve. And this is really looking at the planning element of the value chain and the improvement element. It also encompasses the governance element of the SVS. So on day 5, we're looking at how we can use key principles and methods to actually set direction, how we can plan what we need to do. We also look at GRC, which is governance, risk and compliance. What the role of GRC is within an organisation, and how we can take the various principles and methods, apply them across the value system in terms of driving improvement, managing risk, ensuring that we achieve the controls that we need to achieve. We also look at organisational change management. How we can use that to actually allow us to set direction, to plan and improve, and achieve our overall goal objectives. Okay, so we're looking at things like how we can cascade objectives and requirements throughout the organisation. We'd also be looking at things like policies, controls and guidelines, and differentiating between what is a policy and what is a guideline. So we'll look at examples of that, and how we would deploy guidelines or policies and controls in different circumstances. And also look at how we can establish decision-making authorities at the correct levels within the organisation, within people's scope of control. So the controls really are about making sure that we have the correct controls in place to ensure the the desired outcome in terms of people's actions. What we don't want to do is put controls in place and we end up with unintended, undesirable consequences. Okay, and it's also about understanding when to allow the human to take over. So providing guidelines rather than controls. Also on day 5, as part of DPI, we'll go into organisational change management in a fair amount of detail. As I said, this is probably one of the only practice guides that we do cover in detail within the MPT course. So we'd be looking at what is organisational change management, what the benefits are, where it could be applied, so in terms of scoping, and how we can use the principles within OCM and good communication practice to help us manage and identify work with various stakeholders, how we can drive positive communication, how we can use communication to influence others to achieve the objectives we want to achieve, and also how we establish feedback channels and loops. So we can look at that at day 5, go into more detail. So things like scope of control, controls cascade, differences between policies, standards, guidelines, controls, decision-making authority, GRC, and OCM. And that then would take you on day 5 to a conclusion. So just in summary, the MPT transition course covers about a third of the other courses. So it's 1 day per course. As I said, we don't go into detail. It's the main focus is what's new, what's changed within the organisation. Right, and I think that draws us to a conclusion. So hopefully Bob and Debbie have been able to answer any questions which have come throughout the presentation. I don't know if there are any questions for me or whether we conclude the presentation. Bob, Debbie, any questions?
No, Steve, I've just been adding some notes in the chat as we've been going through, just to highlight some points. So, but other than that, no, I've not had other queries or anything that I couldn't handle. Lovely. Right. Okay. Well, I think we'll conclude the presentation. If anyone has any other questions, queries regarding the course or course content, or they're undecided whether to use the manager this bridging course or whether to take the individual courses, we'd be quite happy to provide advice and guidance and even pricing on that. And I'm sure our account managers would be happy to do a deal if people wanted to book more than one course. Right. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation. I'll thank everybody for listening, and I'll wish everybody hopefully a nice, dry, comfortable weekend. Right. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Goodbye.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
You're right, Steve.